And we're back. We are live.
Yeah, we are back for episode 14 of the Mean Joe Happy Hour Huddle, starring Stephanie Keogh, Anthony Taylor, and fresh off vacation in the Thousand Islands, DJ Renob, Mike Bloomstein. And our guests this week, they're fun, they're cool, pretty smart, hardworking, generally kick a lot of ass. It's us. And today we'll be talking about the secrets of effective radio advertising. Before we get started, as they say in radio, a little housekeeping. If you have a question for us, type it in the chat below and we'll answer it. Also, we'd love to know who's here, so say hi and we'll say hi back. And finally, since we're in advertising and we know a little bit about it and how to measure it, we know how many people are joining us and how few people are actually subscribing. Like 99% of you watching right now are not subscribers. So if you're here watching us and you like what you've seen, make sure you subscribe and hit the like button. With all of that said, now everyone's favorite part of the huddle, the happy hour part. Let's see what everybody is drinking. Stephanie.
So I'm going back to some Sierra Nevada, a little pale ale.
Nice. It fits your setting there.
Well, that's what I thought. If you're going to sit outside on a summer day, you kind of got to have a beer.
Very nice. Very nice. Mike, what do you got? What do you got out there?
Ooh, we got something fancy here. Two Roads, a little heaven. You know, heard it's great. Had a couple over vacay, some leftovers, whatever.
Nice, and a larger can also. There you go, with the
tall
pinky
boys.
And everything.
Whew.
Refreshing.
Whew, session IPA.
Anthony, I heard it first, and then I think I saw it a little bit. You crack open a new bottle over there today.
The Cleveland whiskey has made its official appearance.
Nice. I raided the refrigerator here at Mean Joe today, and I have a bottle of Dos Equis Amber that's been here since Bring Your Parents to Work Day. And so I have that poured into a nice Papa Joe's pint glass. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers. That's the most interesting beer the most interesting brewery makes.
Stay thirsty, my friends.
That's right. Damn it.
It's good. It's a little old. And
it's a little stale.
With a frozen margarita floating in it also, but as an iceberg, but it'll do for now.
There you go.
I have multiple baseball games, so I got a couple beers to be about it. All right. Radio advertising. Why are we talking about radio advertising? Well, we've had on a guest from radio. We've had on multiple guests from radio. And we talked about specific things. We talked about some general things, but it's a good topic for us to cover in our series of just trying to talk about lots of things that can help businesses, and it's something that we really deal with on a daily basis here in one way, shape, or another. And so you guys know this, of course. Some people who are watching probably know this. Maybe there are even people who I worked with at one point or another. But my background was radio advertising sales. I was a sales manager in radio. And so I've experienced radio from that side. I've sold it. I learned about the why radio advertising bullet points back at Ohio State in the School of Journalism, and used some of that to sell and make my case about radio advertising. And then for the past 8.5+ years, from the other side of being a customer of radio and working on behalf of our partners to best utilize radio to get them the measured and tracked results that they need, the direct response. And so it seems like a good topic that I know a lot about, but that I think that everybody here has different experiences with that we know a lot about. And for a lot of businesses out there, regardless of what month it is, what year it is, what factors are out there, might be wondering whether or not radio is something that they should consider, or if they're already using it, it's something that they should continue with. Are they doing it the right way? Are they doing it the wrong way? So I think we can give a lot of good information on how to use radio most effectively, and it'll be different for a lot of different businesses, just because we have a couple of different strategies that we look at. I think that pretty much any business who is tuning in today will be able to get something out of that. So
yeah, and I feel like a lot of people, I mean, we were kind of just talking like, how do we start this? Like, I think it's been for the past 5 or 10 years is radio dead now with all the podcasts. And I mean, I don't think we have numbers, and you can call every radio station, they've got the numbers to show it's not, but we have the success of our partners that really show that there's no way it could be dead, or else our partners wouldn't be doing as well.
Yeah,
no, that's great. That's a good point. Stephanie, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I think, the radio station can show you numbers of, listeners and, points per quarter hour and all of that. But ultimately, any advertising, we've said it before, comes down to the client's return on investment. And if our partners are seeing a great return on their investment from radio, then yeah, radio's working.
So I'm not that old, but I joke that I am old. But even before I was in radio advertising, people who were in radio advertising were hearing that, oh, now that there are cassette tapes, nobody's going to listen to the radio anymore. And then when CDs came out, it was like, nobody's going to listen to the radio anymore. And so on and so forth. You can imagine with MP3s and streaming and all of these services and satellite. So I did look up a fact. I'm not going to source it because I don't want anyone to know where I got it from. And that's my prerogative. But almost 115 million adults 50 and over use radio each month. So 91% of adults who are 50 and over are reached monthly by radio. So that's interesting that it's a 50 plus number, and I'm just going with it because it was the first one that I came up with. But it makes a little bit of sense. I mean, the younger people maybe aren't consuming local radio as much. So there's a little bit of a stat, but to your point, listen, every single week we have meetings with partners who are using radio as part of their media mix. And we know, in some cases that X number of calls came in, X number of leads happened, X number of in-home demonstrations happened, this many were sold, or this many dollars in sales came from people who said that they heard about us on this radio station. It's not always 100% correct. There could be human error on the part of the consumer, on the part of the person at the business who's tracking, but we have a good enough idea of what's working, and what's working really well and what's working well enough, and all of that from that info. And so the bottom line is we can still say, okay, this partner of ours, this business invested X number of dollars in this particular month, and they got this much in sales as best as we can figure from this particular radio station, media source, whatever we want to call it. And we can figure out whether or not it was a strong return on investment, and you can make tweaks and adjustments and analyze that before you make a decision of whether something just doesn't work. But really in 8+ years, we really haven't had to completely abandon that many of the radio buys that we've put in place. I mean, we've had a pretty high rate of success as far as it can be measured. So I say no, radio's not dead. I think that there are some signs that maybe because the younger generation is not spending time with local radio, that you can see how the number will continue to maybe dwindle, or it'll always be that 50 plus that I gave the example. People who are older, who grew up with radio, who have that, nostalgia, who are interested in things that are local, will continue to use it. But so it could be coming a little bit more realistically than it, like how people used to think that it was going to happen. It could be a little bit more in our future than 50 years ago, but
I don't know. They've been saying it for 50 years.
Right. I don't think that it'll still be dead though, because there's still so much, like some of the benefits of radio that I, even go back to, when I was in college, just about being local and serving the community and have a built-in loyal audience. There's just so many reasons why you would think that maybe radio is going to have a place. It's pretty cost effective. On-air personalities or talent, DJs, whatever you want to call them, have fans and people who follow them. And so this is a different way to follow them than just during, just on social media, for instance. But
yeah.
I think something that is interesting about this topic, and then, we're kind of in the just beginning stages of the conversation, but I, love working with the media reps, the radio reps that we work with. But I think they've almost sold themselves out of advertisers sometimes. Like there's this idea of radio is dying, so we're going to start selling OTT, or we're going to start selling streaming, and then it becomes this like all this amalgamation of all these different things, and what are we advertising, and you kind of lose sight of what makes radio advertising so powerful. And it becomes this like, well, we got to add in a call tracking number to add attribution. And it's like, well, that, radio's a mass market piece. Think of how people are consuming it. And then when the call tracking number doesn't get X number of phone calls, or the landing page doesn't get enough hits, the advertiser says, well, there's no attribution there. We can't say there's ROI. Let's abandon it. So, I think that there's to raise our glasses and cheers to the typical saying that we have every time we have one of these. It's not what you do, it's how you do it.
Ooh.
And it's having the right perception of what success looks like, and not hitting the panic button the moment that what you expect to happen doesn't happen. I mean, there is this, we talk about momentum and, kind of letting things run their course a little bit. But, you can't just quit after the first day when one spot ran during the 9 o'clock hour and say that, this doesn't work.
You brought up a good point where, like all these radio stations or TV stations they're like, we've got a digital package now and we've got all this stuff. But if you really just look at radio already, those stations can really be creative and customize a lot for a partner. Whether, it's a 5-second ad, 5-second live read, segment sponsorships, hourly sponsorships, weather triggers. There's so much that radio stations, they have such a great, they can really customize anything that you want. They'll really try to work with you, and you can get really fun with them too, which is, they've got such a great package there. I agree with you that some of the salespeople kind of lose that portion.
Yeah, and a lot of radio stations, and for older people will remember that radio was like really free and really cool, and the DJs could pick what songs they want, and it's a little bit more corporate, and there are these big companies that own these clusters of stations, and so a lot of things are kind of managed in a corporate way, and those corporations are for profit, and so they're always trying to figure out ways to, as they're also anticipating, radio listening possibly going down, and they still have to generate revenue. What can we do? And so, like, most of them would not call themselves radio companies; they would call themselves marketing companies or media companies, or so that's why they're bringing into play other avenues and vehicles and solutions for their people to bring in there. But I agree with you that the flexibility that radio has, the creativity that radio has, there's a lot of a big long list of things like that about radio that the salespeople should still be excited about, and especially when you're working with newer businesses or businesses that are new to advertising and not kind of old crotchety, ad agencies or businesses that have like done it before, because maybe they're not going to get excited about some of that stuff, but some of that stuff are really good solutions, not just throw-ins. But if you're kind of set in your ways, you're kind of like, I don't need that. But they do have a lot of really cool opportunities to be different and help you stand out.
Oh yeah.
So if you put in a Google search for how to buy radio, you're probably going to get something back that says, well, you have to hit a reach of X, a frequency of Y, and if you don't get a certain number of GRPs, don't waste your time. As soon as you're told the rate, cut it in half and make sure you buy the most recent package put together by the sales manager, because that's the best price you're going to get. So from your perspective, Todd, having been the radio salesman, having been the sales manager, having bought as the agency, is that the best way to buy? Do you just look at GRPs, reach, frequency, and hey, that's going to be our package?
So I think that there's probably a time and a place for that, and I'll answer it this way before giving my real answer, is that when I was in sales, I worked with the ad agency for a very well-known quick service restaurant that we've all been to at least 50 times in our lives, that sells like hamburgers. And they would buy, let's just say they sell hamburgers.
No free mentions.
But they would, a media buying department would put together a media plan, and they would determine how many gross rating points they needed to reach to hit their target market, which was everybody, by the way, the X number of times throughout the year. And then they'd come up with their budget, and they would buy advertising on radio, for instance, for 52 weeks of the year, with the same buy every week. And they weren't going to be trying to attribute sales or growth to their radio campaign. It's branding, by the way. Radio is very good for branding. There's studies done all the time, and I've quoted them myself. They've been quoted to me, but radio is 20 or 25% more effective at building brands than other mediums, is a stat that I've heard and thrown around myself. But that's great. If you're driving down the street, you're very likely at any given day or week to hear a commercial for this hamburger place. And by the way, you'll probably be driving by one in a few minutes. And so that kind of approach can work for that. If you're a local business, 1 location, 2 locations, 6 locations, and you need people to call, you need people to walk in through the door, you need people to buy, you need results, and you need to be able to track them back to your advertising. You can't at the end of the year just say, okay, we spent this much and our sales were this, and so our growth was this percentage, so that was good, let's do it again. Like, you need to actually know what's working, what's not working, be able to make adjustments, each month, each quarter. You need to make decisions I don't think that's the way to do it. I always like to say that I have bought as a buyer of radio more on gut than on anything else, even though I do look at a little bit of some of the data that you can get. Like, I'm interested usually in what kind of reach does this have, and is the schedule that I'm putting together or that a rep has presented to us have a good enough frequency. But I don't look at it like it's the be all end all the way that I used to when I sold it and I was presenting to an agency that was really looking at some of those numbers. It's really got to be more about, all right, reach the right people, have the right message, reach the people with the right number of times, have a system in place for tracking results. Probably going back before all of that is knowing what results you want to achieve, and having your campaign designed to help you achieve that would be a really big part of that. And I don't want to make this a Cliff's Notes on the whole thing, so I won't go through the whole thing and say that was it. But there are radio stations that are like consistently for years, for us and for our partners, the biggest, the best performers, if you will, for whatever it is that those partners are trying to accomplish. That anybody who was buying the way that you just laid out, Anthony, from Google, would literally never buy the radio station if they were an out-of-town advertising agency. They wouldn't even know about it. They wouldn't even see it on the ranker they pulled, because they'd pull a ranker of the top 10 or the top 15, and that station could be number 23, which is a whole nother story about working with local ad agencies, because they actually know stuff and have seen stuff, and kind of like that insurance company.
Well, Todd, I was a part of a station that would be in that category of not subscribing to numbers, and there was a big hamburger joint that we would call a bunch, and when they would look at our numbers, you could say they weren't loving it. But there are tons of partners, and I mean, those kind of radio stations are the ones that are probably trying to be the most creative with you and coming up with some pretty creative content and ways to get your name out there, and they work.
Well, doesn't that go back to what Todd was saying in that little speech he just gave?
Right.
You've got to reach the right people, right? So you're looking for, you have to be able to identify which people are listening to which stations, yes, but you also have to identify which people do we need to activate to come in to do the things we need them to do to make it work for our partners. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's fun. So I was trying to think, there's been another episode where we were talking, and I kind of talked about this a little bit, but
Are we going with the Bill Will story?
No. This is different.
Okay.
I'm sure we'll get to that.
Well, because we could link to that
at some point. No, but when I was first in radio sales, call it early '90s, if you had a new customer that was on the radio, or sometimes even if you were just going to present to them, you would take what we would call a spec spot, or if they were already advertising, their commercial was airing on the radio. So you would get their spot and you'd get it to them, but it was on a cassette. So, I would carry around my jam box or whatever, my little cassette player, and play it for them and hand it to them. But I think it might have been Keith who I was talking to this about when he was a guest, Keith Hotchkiss, shout out, in one of our earliest episodes. But, like you'll be meeting with somebody and they'll tell you they want to be on a particular station because it's the station they listen to. So if you're a 65-year-old man and you like to listen to conservative news talk, but you have a store that sells, the newest, freshest clothes for, teenagers, freshest kicks and all these special edition Nikes and stuff like that, you probably don't want to advertise on conservative news talk station. You might want to be on some stations that are targeting a little bit younger. But you'd have this conversation. They're like, well, I want to be on the station because I want to hear my spots. And I would be like, well, I'll give it to you on a cassette, or as time went on, I'll email you an MP3, or you'll be able to hear it anytime you want. But yeah, that's an important thing, is identifying who your target is and figuring out which station reaches them the best, or which stations, once you can afford to invest in more than just one, reach them best. And that's a hard thing to do on your own if you are not an expert in this. So you can do a little bit of research. You can trust, somebody from one of the media companies to provide you with some of that info, and you can try to educate yourself and learn that way. You can also find a marketing consultant or an advertising agency or somebody who that's what they do. I'm just saying, that's what they do, and they're an expert, and you be an expert in your business and let them be your expert. But having been one, I like to say, that the salespeople from radio, just like at TV or whatever, can be very helpful. Sometimes you might come across somebody who, is an expert. They're an expert in their station. They're a student of marketing. They care about your business. And you might also have some people who are a little bit more just salespeople, and that might not be as much help to you, but you could still get some information from them, but you're going to have to do it a little bit more yourself. But yeah, knowing who your target is, like who do you need to reach, and then matching that up with the radio station is number one. Maybe. There might be something else that's number one.
I think something that, from the digital perspective, looking into radio, something that radio and any traditional medium, whether it's out of home, billboards, or TV, they do really well that you can't get with digital. As with digital, you're paying for either every click or every impression. Whereas with radio being a mass market reach, I mean, if you're in a digital campaign and you're only hitting females 25-54, you're only going to serve up ads to females 25-54.
Mm-hmm.
If you're on a 25-54 radio station that's targeted at females, you're also getting reach to males, to kids, to older than 54, lower. I mean, your reach of the market is much more, and it could be even a more efficient ad spend because you're hitting more people, and it's not just that, you're not paying for that one-to-one interaction.
Absolutely.
So you're saying that maybe not the primary demographic is the only demographic that listens to a radio station?
No. I don't believe
Or
it.
that is your customer. Or that is your customer. I mean,
Right.
So that's the next step of that conversation then, is if you think you know exactly who your customer is, if you're, pretty sure that you want females 25, 54 or whatever, but once you start advertising on radio, you realize that more and more you're seeing 50 plus men walk in your store. You've reached them on a radio station. So it kind of covers you a little bit if you've, made a misjudgment, because radio is a broader audience. Got to spend money to learn that lesson. Maybe someone telling you wouldn't have had to spend the money in the first place, but the broader reach, I think, is important to radio too.
Yeah, this is all over the place, but one of the things I thought of while you were talking about that specific targeting is sometimes we have conversations with people who they talk about waste. So they operate out of a particular suburb, and they know that a high percentage of the people who frequent their business come from a 5 to 10 mile radius. So why would they advertise on a radio station that reaches an entire metro area. So that was one of the things I was thinking about, Anthony, while you were talking about that kind of narrow target, is that there's also some geographical disadvantages. But we have a similar conversation about like TV and cable a little bit. But if you were to advertise on a general local radio station, you would probably reach more people in your area of influence, whatever you want to call the radius that you would draw around your business on that radio station. And even though, yes, you would in there, you don't want them to come to your business. I mean, I get it, because we've had these conversations about somebody who goes out and goes to homes, and maybe they don't want to drive 45 minutes or have their salespeople go 45 minutes, if that's the case. But if your business is, better than the competition and worth people coming to, tell them about it. They'll come to it from far away. And so we don't really look at it as a waste, but understandable that we've had that conversation before.
Well, I think it goes back to what Anthony was saying. In digital advertising, if a company has done some digital advertising, they're used to paying a certain amount for every time they touch a customer. In radio, you're not paying to touch the people who live, 5 suburbs over and aren't going to come to your store. Yeah. But you might just happen to get them. You're not specifically paying to reach that person. It's a bonus if you've reached them and they come in and it hasn't cost you anymore.
Right.
Absolutely.
And the other thing about that is you are trying to think of the right way to say it. So
say it the wrong way.
Forget it.
Well, so we've talked about the efficacy of radio. We've talked about some different strategies as far as buying goes. I think another component to talk about is creative.
We were right there. I was like, we've talked about audience and frequency a bit. Where's the message? And 14 episodes in, we are on a wavelength. Don't forget to like and subscribe for episode 15. Damn straight.
So with messaging, their theory, the more time you should say your name in your advertisement 7 times so that you reach a customer 7 times. You should run 15s for a greater reach, because you're going to get twice the number of spots with a 15 versus a 30, because that's math. You should buy a sponsorship for XY. I mean, as far as messaging goes, what are some ways that a business can convey the message of what they do, whether it's product or service, to effectively implement a radio strategy?
So really quick, I just want to start off with this. If you are a local business and you are doing your own marketing and advertising on your own, and you work with a salesperson from a media company, a radio station, and you tell them all about your business, and then they write your commercial for you, and then the radio station produces it and it goes on the air, you are a little bit part of the problem of why a lot of people write advertising the way that they do. In other words, salespeople from media companies, some of them are like students of advertising and marketing, and have that kind of way of thinking about it. And some are, in sales, they like music, they like sports, they like news talk, whatever, and so they like people, and they're good at presenting some ideas and things like that, but maybe not the perfect people to be writing commercials. So a lot of the commercials that you hear on radio are written kind of by salespeople, and they're so busy at the station that even like the creative director there just records it. You know what I mean? Like they don't have time to even like make it better. And so I can't tell you how many times I've had a meeting with somebody and they're like based off of all the commercials that they hear, and all the commercials that they hear were written by non-copywriters, non-advertising experts. So number one is forget everything that you've ever heard on the radio, as far as thinking of what your commercial actually has to say. So I just wanted to throw that out there, not to throw my brothers and sisters from a radio world under the bus too bad, but it's just a fact.
No, yeah, and being a former production director, there's so much on your plate already that when you see copy come up, you're just, I'm not waiting for a voice. Like, I'm just going to cut it. And I've had a great few complaints about my voice on radio, which I totally get. It's so funny. But also, you just see the, like, tee it high and let it fly. Why don't you get out to this golf course? And, like, it's like, oh, my God. Like,
the things we used to make fun of were, hey, Cleveland, or hey, homeowners. Like, you don't actually have to address the people who you're talking to. Like, if you've picked the right station and you have the right target and all that, like you can leave that out and use that time for something else.
And one quick thing about that is, if you're from a small town, if anybody's from a small town and you watch like local news, I mean, you know exactly what we're talking about. That's not that shouldn't be the norm.
Right. Yeah. That should not be anyone's guide to messaging or creative.
Yeah.
So, but when you are in radio, like when you're a radio person and you've really dedicated yourself to it, one of the things that you hear a lot and that you say a lot is that theater of the mind. Like, think about if you ever listen to a where they are telling a story, like they're really good at making you like almost see what's going on, or you get what I'm saying, like whether it's a story or there's a guest on, they're asking great questions. There's this whole theater of the mind thing that goes on, and so you got to remember that you can use that theater of the mind. I mean, imagine yourself driving in your car on your way to work. You kind of, you're paying attention to the road, but you kind of sometimes get lost in what's going on, whether it's music or a bit or a story or whatever. So you can use that to your advantage.
Yeah.
And especially if you're a brand, if you're that burger joint, that you can really do a lot of things with your messaging. If you're branding, especially if you're branding, and you can use music because people are listening to the radio, so they are expecting music. So it's not always an ad or a commercial. You know what I mean? There's like little things that you can use cool sound effects, and you can do all kinds of stuff. You can be very like theatrical or cinematic. We've all heard those bad kind of conversation, but there's every once in a while there's a good spot where there's like two people talking, so there's a lot of different ways you can go. I feel like I've, over the years, when I was in radio advertising sales, wrote a lot of really good creative commercials that were never bought. Like, the person never decided to use it, but like it was like taking an inanimate object but have that be the voice of the spot, like things like that. Or sometimes just laughing for like 20 seconds and then 10 seconds of saying what the business is, but the business has to do with laughing, whether it's a comedy club or something. Like, you can get super creative and be really impactful and literally never say a phone number or even a web address these days. I mean, you don't have to.
So I think, you got to always go back to, if you are the consumer, how are you functioning, right? So if you're driving along and everyone is doing the same, it just becomes programmatic background noise, hearing the same type of commercial, the same, here's another phone number. You got, 440-216. It's all like spinning in your head. You're not going to remember the phone number, no matter how many times they repeat it, because in one commercial break, you've heard 4 different phone numbers 16 times, right? So that's not necessary. Sometimes what creative is going to grab someone's attention is what's different than what everyone else is doing. So Todd, I think your, laughing example is great. If I'm driving and I just hear, 15 seconds of laughter, I'm like, whoa, what's going on? Maybe I should pay attention, right? So you convert that person's focus from, background noise and whatever, they're planning what they're going to make for dinner that night. And now all of a sudden they're paying attention to your commercial. So while you were talking, the question that popped into my head is, back when you first started playing radio versus now, do you see a difference in the need to give out contact information?
Oh, absolutely. Now, most businesses, even those who have experts who are telling them that they don't have to, have a little bit of a fear factor of letting go of that, because there are some people who will remember the phone number or write it down. But of course, I mean, everybody's got one of these in their hand, and everybody's very used to just searching for whatever it is that they heard. And even if you don't know how to spell it properly, you usually can find it pretty well. And as long as you know how to skip over the first three things, you might, not call the wrong place. Or if it's any of our partners, you do want to click on one of the top three. But yeah, I mean, that was not even a thought or an option, 20 years ago, I guess, maybe 20 some years ago. But even then, it still was not like everybody. There weren't smartphones 20 years ago. So
I think
it was too much to have to say it three times. It just seems a little much. Now, if you make a good enough impact, if you make a powerful enough statement, if you say your name of your business one time in the commercial, but everything else that you said was enough to get somebody to remember that, they'll find you. So for sure.
Yeah, I think both Todd, Stephanie, both you guys mentioned this, is I'm driving in my car. And I think we have to consider the consumer behaviors to help, one, decide when we're going to place advertising, and two, what type of creative and messaging we're going to have. You think about the history of radio, and yes, when it first came out, you had a massive, it was my great-grandmother's at this point, radio that sits in my parents' living room now. But, that thing was 200 pounds, wasn't going anywhere, and everybody sat around it, and the guy on the other end told a story, and then, well, Cleveland, thank you for listening in tonight. We're going to give a shout out to blah, 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 Drug Mart. And that's how it started. And then it evolved, and then people had the radio in their car. And people were listening still when they were in their home, but also when they're driving to and from work. Fast forward now to, what's relevant, and that is people are mostly listening to and from work. Also, now you have streaming radio. So maybe you're getting more people who are sitting at their desk again and listening, or sitting in their back patio and listening. And I think having creative that speaks to how and when consumers are consuming your ads makes it that much more impactful. And you don't have to say the phone number 3 times, because they're going to find you. There used to be the Yellow Pages. Now it's the Google.
So you're telling me, Anthony, that as people are driving to work, we don't want to encourage them to be dialing phone numbers on their phone?
Well, if you're an insurance company, it might be really good to help create some customers, but
right.
It's not always best to try and pull somebody off the bench with your advertising.
You just got to tell them to pull over right now. Pull over right now.
Find the median, pull over.
Get off the road.
So another piece about messaging is that, and you mentioned streaming, is without going into all the details, that there are times when people who are listening via streaming are being served up different commercials than people who are listening to terrestrial radio in their car or on a transistor or whatever else people use these days. And so I do think that under the heading of "it's not what you do, it's how you do it," the creative for those commercials in an ideal world should be different. You don't have to Just like you don't have to say, "Hey, Cleveland," to the in your terrestrial spot. You don't have to say, "Hey, streamers," to the people who are. But you could try to relate to those people in a little bit more of a one-on-one way, in a way that has an impact on them and lets you know that you're talking to them, so that it's not just airing the exact same commercial.
Well, and that could be a slightly different audience than the terrestrial version of that same station.
Yeah,
so,
correct.
A little tweak to your message to speak to them more.
Mm-hmm.
Probably a good idea.
Anthony, you look like you're about to say something.
Well, I was just going to say, so kind of the next iteration of next question here. If you look at the list of the least trusted professions in the United States, you have like taxman goes underneath advertiser. So people generally don't trust advertising, even though we are able to, convince people, influence their behaviors on a regular instance. And whether it's B2B sales, B2C sales, people buy people. They come back for an experience with an individual a lot of times than with just a product or a service. So how can brands, businesses help, overcome some of that lack of trust from marketing and have people buy people?
So this is the lead into the story, which is where I was gonna kind of go. So a strategy, and I think there's probably different ways, and there's companies that use a person. It could be somebody who is well liked, well trusted, beloved in the community. A lot of times you'll see that be former, athletes who are from the local team, or maybe somebody who used to be on the news who's now retired. We all know who these people are. But a strategy that we use a lot, and we've talked about a little bit in other episodes, is using on-air personalities as endorsers. And so I'll step away for a quick second and tell this quick story. Is faster than ever. Hi, Mom, if you're listening. Without the whole background, I had left a radio company that I was with, and I had a non-compete. And I sat out for a while, and I started interviewing, and I really only wanted to go to one radio station to sell again, because I had sold for stations that were not highly rated and who had audiences that were a little less desirable, and I wanted it to just be, I felt I deserved to have a little bit of an easier sell. And so WTAM in Cleveland, 1100 AM, the big one, news talk station, was the station that I had targeted that I wanted to work at. I interviewed, I was offered the job, and I accepted the job, and like any good kid would do, I called my parents to let them know, and my mom said, "Oh my God, you're going to be working with my friend Bill Wills." So we all know, and most people who are watching might know, but just in case, Bill Wills is the host of Wills and Snyder in the morning on WTAM, and I said to my mom, I worked at this radio company before for a bunch of years, and I was in the same building with Bill Wills for a good number of those years, and I've been in meetings with Bill Wills. I've sat at the same Wills. I've ridden in the elevator and talked with Bill Wills. Like, how did I not know that you and Bill Wills are friends? And my mom said, "Well, we're not actually friends, but I listen to him every morning, and I love him, and that's why I got my car at such and such car dealership at the time." And so I thought, my mom is relatively like upscale, kind of savvy consumer, not the kind of person who I think is like totally influenced by advertising. And when this happened, I thought, if that works for my mom, that is what I'm going to do when I work at the station. I'm just going to sell endorsements. And that's one of the things I focused on while I was there, because I thought it works. If it worked with my mom, it's going to work for other people. And that's still true. My philosophy on that, changed a little bit, in that that's not the only thing you do. There's different businesses require different strategies. And at a certain point, you can't get endorsers because you might have a category where they're already endorsing something, and so you have to be able to have other strategies and come up with other ways to do it. But to your point of your original question, and how many times have you heard me say this already? But if you have a product or you have a service that has a great story, started out of a garage in Lakewood, selling dining room sets, and now have a bunch of big warehouses selling all this, or best friends since second grade and started this company with very little money out of a small office. And you have a really good story. People love that. People love a great local story. That can help build some trust. If you have a product or service that needs explaining, it's very difficult to understand. We've had a number of partners over the years where no matter what you do, there's still people who, if you ever mention to them that we work with them, what do they do? Like, they don't know. Do they leave the dumpster, or do they come and pick up all of your stuff? Geez, we've been running advertising for a while explaining that, but how do you not know? Or so if you have something that needs explanation, I think that's another opportunity where this strategy I'm going to talk about will work. And then the other one is this trust factor. So if you are in a, and it's pretty much every business, I guess, but there's some maybe a little more than others. Like if you're in home sales, so HVAC, windows, roofing, you're inviting a salesperson to come to your house rather than you walking through the doors of a retailer. You got to feel some kind of trust or comfort before you invite somebody into your home. And we all know that trust is earned, and it's very difficult to earn trust in a 30-second commercial on radio or TV or on a print ad or a direct mail piece. But the Bill Willses of the world, these on-air personalities, these hosts, especially those who talk a lot, who have a talk show, or maybe they play some music, but they do mostly talking. They have these relationships where their audience, who are not, I hate to even call them audience, they're their fans. They're their friends. My mom is Bill Will's friend. He doesn't know her at all, by the way, still. But, when these people say, hey, if you are looking for a car, you should go see my guys over at da-da-da-da. Let me tell you all the great things about them. And I trust them. I got my wife's car there. My kids are driving a car from there. Then that to a fan says, okay, if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me. Or he trusts them, I'll trust them. Mm-hmm. And it's not a scam. I mean, typically the on-air personality, has the right to say, I don't want to endorse somebody who I don't believe in the way they do things, or they don't do things the way that I think they should. Certainly they get paid an endorsement fee, but I think most people wouldn't just endorse any business. They wanted to have some type of a fit with their morals, values, ethics, brand, whatever you want to call it. So that's one of our go-to strategies. Anytime we have a partner who has any one of those criteria of needing trust, of having a product or service that needs some type of explanation, or who, what was the other one? Sorry, I'm just kidding. What are we doing here? Just kidding. Yeah, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. No, I've had endorsers really just won't work out and kind of turn down large investments because they just didn't agree with it, or I would never use this. It's when you're hearing an endorser, for the most part, or from my case, that all of them, they're using that product, they trust the product. They wouldn't, a lot of them wouldn't use it. I don't know. I think most of them wouldn't, but I'm sure there's some out there.
I'm really glad you brought that up, Todd, because I think that, going back to Anthony's point about how, people don't trust advertisers, and a lot of companies buying advertising might think that, of course, if I pay you enough money, you're going to say what I want you to say. Mm-hmm. But part of any radio talent their job, their continued livelihood is their integrity, and they take that seriously. And
Yeah.
I agree with you, Mike. Everyone that we've ever worked with has had that level of integrity to say, this, what, I have an allergy to this, so I can't endorse that product. Or, what, I'm sorry, but I had this relationship with this company and I'm going to stick with them, so I can't endorse your product. Their integrity is how they stay employed.
Yeah, and why it works, because they have that with their fans as well.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So you as the advertiser are borrowing some of their integrity and applying it to your product, your service.
Yep. I guess one last little note on that is, I do think that it helps track the results better, because you will have people who will be able to remember where they heard it better. So if everybody listens to multiple radio stations every day or every week, it might be difficult if you're on a bunch of them. But when it's tied to an on-air personality, it gives another reference point for the consumer to be able to, help you track, so that you can, have some type of a measurement of your return on ad spend or return on investment.
Yeah.
The only thing I'd add to this is kind of, I'm glad we had this conversation after the messaging conversation, because yes, brands have their messaging and their what they're trying to get across to consumers. But if you're investing in partnering with an endorser, I think it's really important to trust their voice and trust how they communicate with their fans. If you're an upbeat, bubbly person and your endorser is a dry humor person, a little more highbrow humor, you have to get comfortable with, yes, they're getting the heart of the message, but they're saying it in the way that their fans respond to. And as long as it matches up with your values and your, what you are trying to get across. But you can't, if you're going to borrow, as Stephanie said, borrow their trust, borrow their voice, you have to know that you're borrowing it, you're not owning it, and you have to let them do what they do as professionals.
Such a good point, Nick.
Yeah, really good point. Nice.
All right. We got 2 minutes. Usually we end it with a speed round or a actionable tip. Which one we want to go with this week?
Actionable tips.
Actionable tips.
Actionable tips.
We could do
So,
that.
Mike from the Thousand Islands.
I can, yeah. The tip.
How do you not get a
TIP.
sunburn after being up? No,
I thought I looked tan. Don't I look a little tan?
You look tan. You don't look burned. That's what I'm saying.
Oh man, sunscreen like 4 times a day, and you gotta see my thick sandal tan. It is awesome. I'm so proud of it. But I can start off. So my tip, or I guess we'll call them secrets for this one. My secret that I would take out of this is you gotta get creative, not only with your creative, but with the buying as well. These radio stations will work with you. The budget, it doesn't have to be large. You can get creative with that, whether it's with 15s, 6A to 6As, different day parts. Just get creative with it.
I'm going last with the actionable tip. Who's next?
All right, I'm gonna stick with the creative too, and don't try to smart yourself with the creative. Don't try to just, I'm gonna do this super cool thing because I think it's super cool, and then stretch to reach it. You've got a simple message about why your product is good. Let people know that, and then get some help if you need to differentiate that with the way it sounds on radio. Don't just try to outthink yourself, because then you're going to end up sounding a little ridiculous.
I like that. So I think I'm going to go with the know what you don't know. And that goes both for buying, creative, and measurement. Know know that you won't always 100% know where every single consumer comes from, and don't give up on radio just because you can't track someone from hearing the commercial, going to your website, scheduling an appointment, becoming a customer. From the digital guy, radio still works. Don't give up on it quite yet.
All right. So the point of us doing this happy hour huddle every Thursday is that in hopes of a business watching, and that we give something helpful, something interesting, something educational, maybe a little bit entertaining, and not to promote ourselves. And so this is not to promote just ourselves, but in general, I would recommend that you find an expert to help you with this, because we've met with and worked with a number of companies who did this themselves, got frustrated, and the last thing they did before they were going to just quit and give up on it was reach out to somebody, and it helped their business. We've also worked with people who had already fielded a proposal from a media company, in this case, a radio company. And then when we evaluated it, found out that while the salesperson wasn't doing anything immoral, unethical, but that the schedule that they were presenting was probably more beneficial to them or fit kind of their needs than it did the actual business's needs. And we were able to, put together a schedule that we knew would work, or give it a better chance to work based on our experience and our track record and what we were doing with other partners that worked. And then they ended up hiring us and going with that and having what I feel pretty confident saying were better results than they would have had they gone with that initial kind of package that they were presented. So feel free to call us, but find somebody who's an expert, if not, who can help you with that, and who will be your partner and help you reach the right people the right number of times with the right message, and track it for success.
Perfect. All right,
everybody.
Cheers.
Books.
Cheers. Crushed it.